I can't find anyone to service my vintage audio equipment anymore. All the old timers are closing up shop. Next guy is 3 states over and the wait time is crazy. Sound familiar? A lot of people assume that vintage audio repair is a dying trade, but I don't buy it. Things have changed and I think we're on the verge of a tech resurgence. Back in the glory days of vintage hi-fi, almost every town had a shop that could repair a receiver like this. But nowadays, you'd be lucky to find somebody qualified in the same state. But why is that? I have some ideas. In the 1970s, repair shops were everywhere, but it wasn't just stereos that needed repair. TVs, radios, jukeboxes, electronics were built to last and designed to be serviced. If you wanted to learn the trade, the path was clear. Basic electronic courses were taught in many high schools, vocational programs trained aspiring technicians, and there was a strong demand for skilled repair work. Vendors supported their products with excellent service literature and replacement parts. But by the 1980s, all of that had changed. Vinyl records went out of fashion and were replaced by cassettes and CDs. The quality of equipment dropped significantly due to economic pressures and market trends. Established brands went out of business or changed hands, and the parts started to dry up. The vocational programs went away, and it became cheaper to replace a piece of electronics rather than pay somebody to repair it. We entered the throwaway era. And remember, this all happened before the internet became mainstream. Hi-fi shops and repair businesses couldn't just jump on eBay and verify the value of used equipment. They had to rely on accumulated knowledge and blue books like this. Back when I was in college studying music around 2010, I worked at a local pawn shop. We used eBay a lot of times to determine the used value of audio electronics, but sometimes there were pieces that there was just no history on, especially back then. So that's when we reached for these audio blue books. As far as I know, the information contained within these books was compiled by Orion by interviewing various businesses, looking at publicly available data on the wholesale and resale markets. But basically, it's a catalog of a ton of different hi-fi brands. Let's look at a Pioneer SX1250. Today's market, the SX1250 in good working condition is anywhere from $2,500 up to $4,000 if it's fully restored, maybe even higher at this point. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. So let's find Pioneer in here. SX1250. Retail price in $77 to $79, $950. Estimated value in 2001, $254. Being able to accurately assess the market value of a piece of electronics is important for both the consumer and the repair shop so that a judgment can be made about whether or not a specific project is financially viable. For example, who's going to pay somebody 20 to 30 hours worth of labor plus parts to restore a Sansui G33,000 when the Blue Book only says it's worth $576? But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Imagine trying to replace a control or even a switch cap before the internet. What about service literature? How would you go about sourcing a service manual for an obsolete product from a company that's been out of business for years? So with all of that in mind, it should be pretty clear why the majority of brick and mortar repair shops disappeared. But we aren't living in that world anymore. When I became interested in vintage audio in the mid-2000s, equipment prices were relatively low and most of the action was on AudioKarma, where users were pooling their knowledge to help each other fix their own gear. And although I'm sure that renewed interest in vintage audio online contributed to stronger demand for audio repair, what really kicked things off was the resurgence of vinyl circa 2007. Everybody and their brother wanted a turntable, but phono inputs had been dropped from consumer electronics for years at this point. Vintage audio equipment had the proper inputs, but maybe more importantly, cool factor and nostalgia. Equipment values began to rise significantly, and then COVID really pushed things over the edge. A lot of technicians that were still operating during COVID saw a spike in repair requests, often resulting in backlogs of over a year. And the amount of requests really hasn't slowed down all that much since then. So the demand for audio repair is high and seems to be growing, while the supply of qualified technicians is low and shrinking. That means the cost of audio repair is going up, and that's a huge opportunity. So if the opportunity is so great, why aren't more people entering the profession? I think it's because we're looking at audio repair through the lens of the past. So let's take a look at 6 of the most common outdated assumptions about the audio repair industry and how things have changed. Assumption number 1, the educational pipeline is gone. Well, this one is mostly true. Those basic high school electronics courses and vocational programs are pretty much non-existent. But I'd argue that nowadays we have something even better. YouTube University. And I'm not talking about an institution of higher education. I'm talking about normal people that are very skilled at something specific sharing their knowledge on YouTube. We also have forums like AudioKarma and DIY Audio that are a great repository of past knowledge. So if you've got a specific issue with a unit that you're working on, chances are somebody in the past has had that same issue, posted it on AudioKarma, and had a professional walk them through how to fix it step by step. So that's another great resource. Those options are basically free, but if you wanted to take it more technical, there's devices out there like the Analog Discovery, which is basically a USB oscilloscope signal generator analyzer device that you can use along with projects to teach yourself electrical engineering at home. Assumption number 2, a lack of vendor support. This one I'd consider almost a non-issue at this point. There's a huge repository of service information online between HiFi Engine, Electrotanya. There's even specialized technicians that have dedicated web pages to an individual brand or model with extreme detail, write-ups, diagrams, the whole works. We also have access to focused Facebook groups that have experts in them on certain brands and models. So you can go in and ask a very specific question and you get a very fast answer. That's probably, to be honest, better than the answer you would get directly from a manufacturer. Assumption number 3, the parts are no longer available. This one used to be true, but it's not anymore. For the everyday parts we need like capacitors, diodes, resistors, those are all readily available on sites like Mouser and Digi-Key. When it comes to transistors, that can get a little bit more complicated. A lot of times we're dealing with a part that's become obsolete, it's no longer available, but the good news is AudioKarma is a great resource for finding substitutions. So there's a lot of modern parts that will be drop-in replacements for those old obsolete parts. In a lot of cases, they're going to work even better. What about vacuum tubes? In 1976, the McIntosh Clinic program stopped taking on the repair of tube equipment because they couldn't reliably source high-quality vacuum tubes anymore, but a lot has changed since then. Largely thanks to the guitar amplification industry, vacuum tube manufacturing is still alive and well. There's multiple factories throughout the world that are making pretty high quality tubes nowadays, reproducing a lot of the best audio tubes from the past and even working on new designs like the KT150. There's even a company that purchased the old Western Electric tooling and is starting to make Western Electric reproduction tubes right here in the United States. Now what about those controls and switch caps? Well, an entire industry has grown on eBay around parting out units. There's people that go out there and source equipment that's been heavily damaged in shipping. Maybe it's had some sort of catastrophic electronic failure, and they strip those units down to the chassis and sell every switch, every knob, every screw. And then for almost everything else, there's been huge advancements in the DIY maker space. Between desktop 3D printers and CNC machines, we can basically build any replacement 3D part that we need to fix these units. If we end up with a circuit board that's cracked or traces that have been severely damaged by electrolyte leakage, it's no longer the end of the world. We can design a new board in KiCad and ship it out to a PCB manufacturer to build those boards in bulk. I've even manufactured my own circuit boards in-house on the CNC. Assumption number 4, nobody is willing to pay. I was told for years that audio repair was only for retired guys looking to stay busy. You can't make money doing that. No one is going to be willing to pay you for the materials and labor necessary to get that unit up and running properly. That may have been true in the mid-2000s when I started out, but in 2026, with the increased demand that we're seeing, along with strong resale values, audio repair has been my primary income for the last 5 years. eBay completed listings, Terapeak, and other aggregators like HiFi Shark allow consumers to really accurately assess the value of their units so that they can make better decisions about whether or not a repair quote is financially viable for their specific project. My business focuses primarily on the restoration of top-of-the-line monster receivers and highly collectible American tube equipment. Savvy customers often come out way ahead on their investment by taking advantage of the delta between the price of a broken unit and a unit that's fully restored. There's also customers out there that don't care if the repair cost vastly exceeds the value of the unit. They like the way that that piece looks or the way that it sounds, and it makes them happy. They don't plan on selling it, so they would just like to see that it gets repaired properly. Assumption number 5, overhead. It's a common misconception that you need a lot of space or a storefront to run an audio repair business, but that's not the case. A lot of techs run their businesses right out of their homes. When I started out, the space I had available was 1/3 of my living room in a tiny Manhattan apartment, and somehow I still made it work. Luckily, I escaped and now I actually have a dedicated lab room, but really you don't need all that much space to run an audio repair business. You need a big enough footprint to put a bench, a place to store your parts, and a place to store the equipment that you're working on. Along those same lines, another assumption is that the test equipment is too expensive and somehow a limiting factor, but that's really not the case. You don't need a ton of expensive test equipment to be a great audio tech. Most of what you see here is at the bench because it helps me do the job faster. When I started out, it was just a soldering iron, a desoldering hand pump, a nice DMM, and a capacitor checker. Armed with those basic tools, you can do some really good audio repair work. Once I got a little bit more confident, 2-channel oscilloscope, analog signal generator. And to be honest, a lot of techs could stop there, and a lot of them do, and they do really, really great work. Once my business became more successful, I reinvested some of the profits in more test equipment, including this distortion analyzer, FM generator for tuner alignments, and things like that. But to be honest, you can get really, really far just with the basics. So don't let expensive test equipment be an excuse to not get into this. Assumption number 6, there's not enough work. This one always makes me laugh. The technicians I know that have a 6-month, 1-year, 2-year backlog, they would certainly disagree. If you don't have the space to set up your own bench, or you just don't want to deal with the hassle of running your own business, ask around. I bet there's plenty of record stores and hi-fi shops that would love to have a tech on staff, even in a part-time capacity. 25 years ago, almost every one of these assumptions was true. But today, I think there's never been a better time to become an audio technician. We have more learning resources available to us than ever before. Great access to parts, and if we can't find the part, we can probably make it. The demand for audio repair is high, and the supply of technicians is low, leaving a great opportunity. I see this as a great path for people that are getting close to retirement that want to stay busy. It's also a great career path for younger people to pursue if they're interested in something that's rewarding to do, working with your hands, working with your brain, and having full control of your own future. But all this puts me in a tough spot. I spend a lot of time making these YouTube videos, and to be honest, I'd be much better off financially at the moment if I completely shut down the channel and just opened up more repair slots in my calendar. But then I'm only worsening the situation. I'd likely have to continue raising my prices to keep up with demand, and it would pigeonhole me into only working on the high-end monster receivers and collectible American tube equipment that I'm currently focusing on. There are so many examples of quality, affordable audio gear out there that I just never get to work on anymore. That's why I've decided to take a temporary hiatus from public customer work after I've completed my current backlog. I think my time is better invested in creating content to get others excited about jumping into this profession and offering resources to help them learn along the way. I've already started this with the Novolux Stereophonic Patreon page, where I demonstrate real-world repairs to help aspiring technicians learn how to properly diagnose and repair common issues. If that sounds interesting, head down to the description for a link to learn more. If you're in agreement with my vision for the future of vintage audio repair and would like to support the channel on platform, hit the join button to become a channel member. I'm announcing for the first time today, I'm going to be adding early access to videos as one of the perks. Now back to the original question, if all of the old timers are throwing in the towel, who's next? Maybe it's you. Thanks for stopping by the channel. We'll catch you on the next one.